Well, all right. Welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, we're going to talk hyperinflation. Now, hyperinflation, that's not exactly a word you hear every day. Hyperinflation, what it really is if you have 2 consecutive months where the inflation rate exceeds 50%, that's what hyperinflation is.
Right.
So it's basically out
That's
of
the
control
technical
growth
definition.
of your dollar doesn't buy what it used to.
Right.
I looked it up. I'm an old man. I was born way back in 1975. So I wanted to see kind of how much inflation has really, gone. And basically your dollar in 1975 will buy you, I think it's $5.61, some
Okay.
shit like that today. Or the other way. Yeah. It
The other
would
way
buy you
around.
$5.61 of today's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems about on point. And so that's not completely out of control. And I've always thought that if spending got, like if we just keep printing money, when we did that QE or whatever, quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 35, whatever it was in 2008, I was like, well, if we print money like that, that's going to be the end, that'll push us off the cliff. And somehow the end never comes. So, but it turns out
Everything's just going to keep going on just like it is forever.
it's all
There's
good.
never going to be
Chuck,
any
look, it's
problems.
never happened. We never see it.
Right.
Not in my lifetime, right? I haven't seen since 1975, right? There hasn't been any. It's good. All right. So, what actually causes hyperinflation in the past, like traditionally?
Yeah.
What do you got?
I mean, really, a lot of hyperinflation, not all of it, but a lot of it comes from people, people leveraging their economy to fight a war that causes them to spend a lot more money than they have to to defend and to rebuild their country. A lot of the time, that's the cause, and bad
All
politicians
right.
and
So if
stupid
you had like
economists.
if your country was perpetually at war,
Hmm.
like in Afghanistan and Iraq and like that could be damaging, or
Yeah,
maybe
it's not
even with a major superpower like Taiwan or Russia. If
right.
you were, or sorry, with China or Russia,
Uh-huh.
like if you were fighting somebody like that, that might get expensive.
Turns out, yeah. Yeah, if you're always fighting war and everything every day is you know, you're on the cusp of collapse, then you got to have that money, man. You got to print that money up. And especially a lot of the time when countries are at war, um, they're not producing a lot of stuff. Most of their able-bodied people are fighting, right? They're not actually in the farms growing the food. They're not in the factories building things. The United States was great because we got a bunch of butch women that took care of things in the 1940s. Gotta give them a shout out. Rosie the Riveter,
Exactly.
type of
Nah.
girl that's in my dreams every night.
Yeah. Well, hey, the ladies have to step up, and more and more we're seeing that, right? We see that with the Bud ads and everything else. Now, the
That's
big
right.
thing I think everybody's wondering is, well, if we have inflation and everything gets out of control, what happens to my mortgage or my credit card debt?
Mm-hmm.
I've done the research and I have the answers,
Right.
but we're
Right.
going to save that
Okay.
because
Good.
that's
All right.
like the little teaser. I learned that from like radio school. And so we're gonna get there. We're gonna get to the bottom of this, but
Hmm.
I think there should be like more like likes and subscribes, and then we'll get to that answer. Is that
Oh,
how
okay.
you
We
do it?
gotta we gotta get a
Yeah, you got to build
certain
up a
amount
little
first.
bit.
All right.
Call your friends right now, tell them to start watching. That kind of thing.
All right. So let's talk about hyperinflation in
All
real
right.
life. In
Yeah.
real
What
life,
does
it
it
has
mean?
happened several times in a lot of different places. The first like actual recording of the technical definition of hyperinflation, first thing that matches up to that would be the French Revolution, right after the French Revolution. Um, I mean, it's great for a little while, right? You kill all the rich people and take their money. Things work out really well for a little while. But it turns out when you take all the rich people's money, they're not spending it on farm equipment, tools. People aren't getting paid to go to work, right? So
That,
you're not producing anything, and you're not building the infrastructure to produce things. Things get slippery real fast.
yeah, well, one of the things that always frustrates me is people always blame the rich, right, on their money problems. But
Hmm.
here's the thing: two things happen when a rich person has, we'll say, $1 billion, right?
Right.
So, because rich isn't a million anymore. Now it's like 1 billion. You
Yeah.
got a million. People
Those
people have
poor
a million.
schlubs running
People
around
have 1 million
millionaires.
in credit card debt.
Uh,
That's the thing. Like I just was listening to like Dave Ramsey or something. And this girl's like, yeah, I'm 27 and me and my husband, we have about 1.3 million in credit card debt. And I'm like,
ooh,
no. Well, I guess
yeah.
no. It was debt. So it
It wasn't
included
necessarily
a
credit
two and
card debt.
$150,000 mortgage. It included, but remember, that's still over 1 million in debt left over. The
Right.
rest was credit cards, unsecured loans, and student debt.
Yeah, student debt is a real killer.
Oh yeah,
And
she
those
said a third,
they
was
try,
student debt, which is
those
crazy.
interest rates on student loans aren't like that's not like a 3% loan. You know what I mean? Those student debts, they rack that money up. They make a lot
Yeah.
of money out of suckers going to art school, I'll tell you
I
that.
think you're in a big neighborhood of like 7% or whatever for a lot of
Mhm.
that, but it can be worse and ugly. So yeah, no, I know it. So anyway, the rich people, right? So two scenarios. The guy has $1 billion and he does one or two things with it. He goes out and he spends that money. This guy's buying Lamborghinis, buying nice furniture, having you putting gazebos all around the yard, got the boathouse, fancy boat. Well, when he's spending all that money, he's putting money in our pockets, the
Right.
working man's pocket, right?
Mhm.
So I make cool engines and he's buying those cool engines to put in his $150,000 pickup truck, right?
Right.
We'll let you figure out what that means. But he does that kind of thing. So that's great, right? That's going to help you out. Now, scenario two, he says, I hate people and I'm smarter than everybody else. So I'm Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life.
Right.
And
Imma
Mr.
keep that money.
Potter says, I'm going to keep that money. He might even lend it out, which is
Right.
awesome, right? He's lending it out, which is causing people to create new businesses, build new houses, do things like that. Or scenario three, I said two. Now we're at three. So scenario three, he just sticks all that money under his mattress.
Mhm.
And that's kind of like Scrooge McDuck, right? I think he was
Right.
like that. He had the big gold room. He was taking baths in there,
Uh-huh.
and right now Scrooge he was doing that. Now, what happens is if there's, we'll say, $1 trillion in the whole economy of the world, or whatever. We understand there's a lot more than that. Our national debt is like 31 trillion.
Mhm.
But say there's $1 trillion and he puts away $1 billion, he just made that money supply a little bit smaller. So there's less money out in the thing. So there's
Mhm.
more of a demand for it. So he
Right.
actually made things better for you by just getting rid of his money.
Mhm. Right, taking
So
it off the market.
there is no scenario where rich guy is your problem.
Mhm.
Now, if he's running in a factory and have you seen this? There is a scenario
Right.
where many rich guys are your problem. Have you seen like 33% of all house sales are to corporations and not to
Yep.
people now?
Yep.
That's crazy. And that is the rich guy screwing you.
Yeah,
And
and
then
I'll tell you this, if you're, a millennial
mhm,
and, you're a hardworking guy, wanna get ahead in life, sorry, dude. That
no.
time's over, you're fucked. If you don't own a house right now, good luck.
What is it Obama said? This is the new normal. Suck it
Yeah, the
up.
new normal is you being poor.
Yeah. It's
You're
gonna
never
suck.
you're never gonna get ahead in life. If you're a millennial now, me and my parents, my grandparents, we already destroyed the economy for you.
We
Like,
we we live
good
the high
luck, dude.
life. You
Game's
ain't
over
nothing.
now.
What is it? I think Sweden or one of those. They always have like the short work week, and everybody does like 40 hours.
Yeah.
I think they're cutting down again to like 4 days and 4 6-hour days, and they can run
Hmm.
their shit. I don't know what we're doing. Where it's like, we're working 3 jobs and
Yeah. No, I think it's great because we get to pass down $31 trillion in debt to these people that they didn't get any of that $31 trillion. That
no,
didn't go to them. That went
no.
to your grandparents. That went to the boomers. They got that money. You just have to pay back their loans now.
Now, so more recently, we have like Venezuela, right? As
That was a recent one. Yeah. Yeah,
the
that happened
recent
fairly
one
recent.
that people are watching, and we see that. But if you go way back and actually Greece more recently,
Yeah, that
um,
was a pretty recent one.
where Europe had to bail out Greece. But let's go back. I don't think that was actually considered true. I'm not really sure
Hyperinflation.
how that in Greece, in Venezuela it was.
Yeah.
Um, but let's go back. So 1944, Greece had 13,800% inflation.
Hmm.
That's pretty ugly. The Weimar Republic, so this is 1923, right after World War One, had 29,500% inflation.
Yeah, that's a lot.
They said at that point employees were being paid hourly,
Right. So,
and
yeah,
yeah,
so they were getting paid weekly, but the money was the value was going down so fast that they demanded to get paid daily so that they could spend that money before the prices went up more. Then they started demanding that they get paid hourly so they could take their money out to their wife. The wife could go spend it and buy stuff because by the end of their shift, the prices would have doubled already.
and they exactly that's crazy. Now it's funny because we see those same things going on now. Like you go by the McDonald's in town here, and the
Hmm.
sign says we pay daily. And it's for a totally different reason. Turns
Right.
out people are so lazy and so short-sighted that they're like, well, I'd go to work if like I had money right now and I could go out tonight.
Right.
But I'm not going to go to work for some fantasy in 2 weeks where I might be. Who even knows if I'd be alive then, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. So then there's Yugoslavia. 1994, we put a ton of sanctions on Yugoslavia because they were killing each other,
Right.
and we frown
I
on
mean,
that.
they were behaving kind of shitty. I
The
mean, let's
word
be
the
honest. It
word
wasn't.
genocide was being thrown about, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So, all right, they had 313 million% inflation.
Right. So what that meant for them was that between 1992 and 1994 in Yugoslavia, prices were doubling every 1.5 days. Every
Dude,
1.4 days, the prices would double.
it was so bad. They said if you bought a pack of cigarettes in the morning, that it would be worth one cigarette in the evening.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's kind of like you're like saving money. You buy that pack and you save two, you've like doubled your investment
You
right
doubled
there.
your value.
I had Zimbabwe,
Mm,
2008.
that was a bad one. And that was, prices doubling every day. That was a little bit
Yeah.
faster than Yugoslavia. And
And
that was really completely due to government corruption
yeah,
and
all day.
like dumb people doing dumb
Um
stuff.
Well, what? Here's where it's dumb, and it's kind of the whole South Africa thing, where, well, yeah, so where they're basically going after the farmers and being like, oh, we don't like white people or anybody doing all this farming. They kick them off the land, or anybody they didn't agree with. They take back the land and they redistribute it and give it to somebody else.
That doesn't know how to
But
farm.
yeah, exactly. So everybody who's out in town is like, oh, well, I'd like a farm because I see that rich guy. Look at all that food he's got.
Right.
That's not fair. I'd love to have what the farmer has.
Right.
and they go take the farm, and then they're like, well, I'm not doing that shit. Otherwise I
Yeah.
would have been a farmer,
Yeah.
And then
Turns out
so
this is hard work and it
yeah.
sucks. And I
For,
don't know what I'm doing.
and the same thing, like, so I give you a factory and you're like, yeah, make it run. And then you're like, yeah, I think engineers, everybody should all be paid the same because I love socialism. And
Right.
then I might be thinking of Atlas Shrugged, but I feel like that happens. And you basically destroy a business. They had 79.6 billion% inflation
Hmm.
in November 2008. So that was a little rough.
Yeah.
Hungary. Hungary had war damage, reparations, and 4.19 quadrillion%
Yeah.
inflation.
That's not even a real number.
It. I'm going to tell you about those numbers. What do you know
And that
about
so that
Hungary?
was actually that was Hungary between 1945 and 1946 was the highest inflation recorded.
Yes.
Historically that was the highest inflation that's ever existed.
Now, I actually have some perspective for you
Hmm.
on what like a quadrillion or a trillion. I don't even have quadrillion, but I'm going to tell you about these big numbers. So, in 1981, the US national debt was $1 trillion.
Hmm.
Right?
It's a lot
Those
of money.
were and they thought that was going to cripple our economy. They were
Yeah.
like that would be the end. We've gone too far. So then 2009, it was $12 trillion. 2023, we're at $31 trillion. Now, I do have a little perspective. So here it is. So, like, we can understand what a million is, right? We can kind of picture that. We know that, $1 million maybe buys you a half a million, buys you a really nice house, in the better part of your state, maybe, unless you live in
Hmm.
California or New York, of course.
Yeah.
But,
No. Doesn't
right?
buy you
So
doesn't buy you anything here.
yeah, I hear you. So a million, we'll put it in time. A million seconds is 12 days.
Right.
So now we're going to bump up to a trillion. A trillion seconds is 30,000 years.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
it's a big
that's a
difference.
little difference. And then forget about it, like 31 trillion, obviously the math, it's 930,000 years.
Right. That's seconds.
So basically, if you have, yeah, I mean, that's just insane. Right now, the US economy, it's $1.3 billion a day in interest.
Hmm.
That's where we're at. So just like, hanging out, we're like, oh, we're getting into billion, billion,
Hmm.
1.3, whatever. It's just a rounding error, point 0.3
Right.
at that, point 0.3 billion. That's not 300 million,
Yeah.
whatever.
Whatever, dude.
That doesn't mean anything. I don't
I
know.
wipe my butt with $300 billion bills.
Exactly. So the bottom line is there's a lot of things going on right now that kind of, seem like things could really get out of control. And we're doing a lot of stupid things that just kind of keep aggravating all this. So, what actually happens, right? So, when we look at like Venezuela and these kind of places, what happens when a country runs out of money, the spending gets out of control? Well, the thing is, a government, their priority, they always see themselves as essential.
Right.
Like the government is the most important thing. And if we don't have a good government,
Yep.
it's all going to fall apart.
Right. Right.
God forbid the people know what's going on and can
Hmm.
handle their own business, right? So we have first thing is they kind of want to pay the police and the law because you got to protect the government officials, right? So
Right.
they're
Right.
like, oh, and maybe by police it's the military that we're gonna have step up and go in and guard everything or whatever. Then all of a sudden the money goes there. The officials, their stuff costs more, so they're just like seizing stuff. Then the water treatment plants start to fall apart a little bit because they're like, well, we
A
don't
little bit
really
of
have
shitty
money.
water.
The poos, the water, that's not important. So that was one of the big things in Venezuela was they couldn't get fresh water and
E.
clean
coli.
water, was
Yep.
the thing. And then so you start to get disease and things like that. Um, California, they probably don't know anything about this, but I've heard they can have rolling blackouts because basically electricity is kind of expensive.
Right.
And well, you don't want to go, we'll say maybe 4 hours without your refrigerator plugged in. So what if we just shut off the power in this section of the city for 3 hours? Like
Right.
we'll just do it at nighttime.
You won't even
Like
notice.
you won't even notice. And like North Korea, they do that every day, right? I
Hmm.
don't know if they're still doing it, but I know 10 years ago, that was the norm in North Korea. And I believe it to be true today
Yeah,
that they just
it's
shut
not
off the
rolling
power
blackouts. It's just you don't have electricity.
at nighttime, right? And so they do kind of things like that. Now, then, obviously, with inflation, by definition, the prices are going up on everything and you can't afford it.
Hmm.
So they're like, well, I'm a great leader. I'm going to say, you know what? We're going to put price caps on everything. And,
Right.
everybody, I think the government likes to say it's a human right to have access to quality food. And then I'm sure once we can't get quality food, then it'll be access to food,
To food.
period.
Right.
And
Right.
access to, the
Access
scale,
to
it's a
insect
sliding
thoraxes.
scale.
Yeah.
Right now you got the whole food pyramid going on, and then it's kind of less and less. So
Right.
what's going to happen is they're going to say, all right, a loaf of bread can't cost more than, we'll say hypothetically, $5. All
Right.
right, that's the limit. Well, the problem is if the farmer
Just
is
by
like,
the
well,
way,
yes,
in New York,
it already is $5.
it's more than $5 for a loaf of bread.
All
Of
right,
Wonder Bread. Not like good bread, shitty bread.
you're talking about straight sawdust,
Yeah.
right? All right. So, all right, for you New Yorkers and Californians, let's say a loaf of bread is capped at $10,
Hmm.
right? And you might think like your bougie health food store bread. If that works for you in your mind, you go with that one. All
Hmm.
right. So, loaf of bread, $10, and that's the limit. Now, the problem is the farmer is like, well, I can't pay anybody to pick the flour and
Hmm.
get the eggs and the things that I need to, and feed my chickens
Right.
and make a loaf of bread and buy the sawdust
Right.
and make a loaf of bread for less than $10. It cost me $20.
Right. So why are
So
you making that? Why would you
so I'm
make
not
bread?
going to make it. And then some governments, I know, what was the one that Russia, who had the big famine, right next to Russia there? Was it
You just
Ukraine? I
described
guess it
15
was,
countries.
yeah, no, but I think it was Ukraine actually back in the day when they had,
Hmm.
where they were like, well, you have to
Right.
make it, just make it
Hmm.
happen. And some countries do that kind of thing, but in a lot of places like Venezuela and stuff, they just stop. They're like, well,
Hmm.
I'm not going to make that. So then there's no more bread. And that's the thing. So I have to sell you a loaf of bread at $10, but for me to get another loaf of bread, the farmer is going to charge me $15. So I can't, it doesn't work.
Right.
So they actually just shut down the store. So
Hmm.
then you might go to the farmer directly and you might say, hey, look, I'll make my own bread. Can you give me some eggs and some flour? And I'm going to fix your tractor that's not working.
Hmm.
And barter starts to become the thing. And
Right.
that's
Right.
that's how
Because
the world
yeah, when
works.
money's losing value faster than you can get it, then it's not worth doing the work for the money because it's not going to be worth what you put into it to get it.
Now, the reason it all starts to fall apart though is people have things they can't create. And there's
Right.
always like a limit.
Hmm.
And by a limit, what I mean is like, all right, so even if I could get diesel or something, I can't refine it without some mystery outside source because the US is so limited on refineries
Hmm.
that I can't do anything with it. So I can't get the gas to run my tractor or my tractor's diesel, but you know what I mean. I can't run the equipment and then it all falls apart. And that's where the whole system breaks down. And you kind of go back into third world, country here where you don't have, I can't make toilet paper, right? I can't do that myself. Now I can go collect a bunch of old copies of the phone book, or I might pick out the choicest leaves
Right.
for you, but that's about as good as it gets. Um, so people basically need to worry about a couple things. They need to worry about growing your own food. They need to worry about security. You need to worry about people. It turns out they turn to
People
thievery
are
and
dicks
now
sometimes.
a lot of places actually still have morals and religion.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what I was reading is some of the countries actually did really well because they were kind of a Christian mindset community. And
Right.
I'm not saying that's the only one that would work or whatever. I'm saying that that whole hey, let's help each other out and make
Yeah,
it
let's
work
keep
and work
our neighbors
together.
from starving to death if we can.
And the
That's
thing is, if and it's not even that, it's let's work together, not I'm entitled to your stuff.
hmm
Now, what always concerns me is in America, people kind of have that I'm entitled to your stuff, mindset.
hmm right.
Um, but that's something that's a little concerning. But anyway, so you also want to think about so we talked about growing your own food, security, uh the police aren't going to work, right? If they're not getting paid, they're not showing up. So you got to worry about your own stuff. Seed saving, that's a big thing for the future. And those of you who can figure that out and understand it, that's huge.
Right.
I put my wife to work on that. She's all over that. That's something you really need to consider is, propagating into the next year.
Right.
Um, People need to find alternative sources of heat. Maybe it's the wood stove coming back to, life, things that we can produce ourselves. And, but also, hey, can you convert your stove, your pellet stove or whatever? Does it work with both? Can you, are you the guy that can rig that stuff up? Or, I know Tractor Supply sells that like 55-gallon drum conversion for,
Uh-huh.
becoming the wood stove. Can you utilize your existing chimney and throw that in there? I don't know. But also, people have their furnace room is like a closed little room and not set up like in the middle of the main living area where
hmm
it can actually dissipate heat. So
Right.
that's something, are you cutting a hole in the wall and running a chimney out there? Do you have some pipe for that? That's something you might want to look into, right? Um, that's the thing. But once you get to like 70% inflation, people can't pay their bills. You get civil unrest. You get they do things like a mandatory minimum wage, but again,
hmm
when it's mandatory, you can't
Yeah. So you just don't
pay.
hire. You can't hire people.
It just yeah, none of it makes sense. So the next thing that always concerns people is, well, what do I do with my money? Like how do I prepare for this, Chuck? So I just told you some of the physical things, right? The
hmm
garden, the security, and we obviously have a lot of episodes on how to, deal with those things. So, where to go on that, how to be sustainable and kind of live off grid without society. That's kind of the whole dream that a prepper, lives.
Right. And that would
But
really insulate you from high inflation. That
And
sort of living.
that's if you had
But
your own meat or meat you could
right.
trade.
It's a
Could
lot
you
of work though.
imagine? That's kind of a cool thing. But yeah, farming is kind of a bear, right?
hmm
People work at it. If you even grow a little bit, it can be work.
Yeah.
Um, and the government is always, Chris said, full of geniuses. I mean, that's the whole thing.
right.
Um, but so the next thing is how to prepare financially. And that's something, I teased you about in the beginning here of, what happens to your mortgage?
hmm
Well, so it's a crazy world. Now, typically, it's kind of like having a mortgage is kind of like winning the lottery on hyperinflation. So if you think of it like in the 1960s, you could buy a house for 25,000 or
hmm
30,000. It's kind of like the perspective goes like that, where it's like, oh, yeah, I could have that mortgage for 30 years and it's $75 a month. That's less than my electric bill.
Right.
That's nothing. And it's pittance and everything's good. So if you actually own something, your mortgage, I looked at like 20 different the number was actually 7. I watched 7 different economists speak on this, and
hmm
they all said basically that's how it's going to play out is you're going to kind of like win the lottery and your mortgage is nothing and you
Right. The
can do it.
price of your
And it
mortgage is going to
sucks to
stay
be
the
the bank.
same, but the
Right.
value of it is going to go way down.
Right. Exactly. Now, again, that's also going to help you. You're going to want to make sure you have a fixed rate mortgage
Right. Because they can
because
change it anytime
that
they want
if
if you
it's
don't.
variable, right?
Right.
And so that's an issue. Now, I did find one example where people did kind of get screwed on that, but they didn't get screwed that bad. So in the Weimar Republic, they had basically, say we had the the German mark, and then we had the German mark 2.0, right?
Hmm.
Which is the new future. Like, so say you made $20 an hour in prior to inflation, you're going to now get $20 an hour of super money in the
Right.
future, right?
Uh-huh.
But your mortgage is in the old,
Is the old
old
money.
mark, right?
Yeah.
So what they did was they said now, because you've never heard of this in America, but in Germany they were like, we need to protect the banks and the corporations.
Right. There's a lot of rich people losing money. That's no
Right.
good.
And that we can't have that.
Yeah.
So
Those are
what
the
they
people that
did,
are writing the laws. I mean, who's going to
so
decide economic policy? Obviously,
they
the rich people are.
right. So even though you had what did I say in for Weimar Republic was like 29,000% increase inflation,
Hmm.
they basically made it 25% of the new money.
Hmm.
And so they did that. So there was one instance where, the government said, hey, but you know what's funny? They did for the mortgage companies, screw you, the little man, we're going to make it go up 25%. So really you had this huge increase in reality based on those dollars and the deal that was made.
Hmm.
But now for government bonds, you had the German bonds, they actually only paid you a 2.5% increase.
Hmm.
Because, fuck you. Like, you're a little guy. Like, what do we care?
Right.
So, I'm sure they painted it like, well, really, corporations own the bonds and it's not you and, whatever. But yeah, it's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
It's bottom line, when the government pays, it's only a 2.5% increase, but it's a 25% increase when it's you. I'm just saying that's kind of shady. Now, the other thing, so credit cards are kind of the same thing where you still kind of win, but the problem with credit cards is your interest rate can change. So you just want to be able in a position where you can kind of pay it off quick.
Right.
And people always think, well, I have a truck that I could sell for 20 grand, right? Or my tractor or whatever, right? It's all 20 grand.
Hmm.
Well, the problem is in hypothetical, right now you could maybe get 20 grand worth of value, but if people can't feed their families,
Yeah.
you
They're not
might
out
get
looking to spend
$5,000, right,
$20,000 on a truck.
on a
Yeah.
truck. Well, that has big tires, so that's cool.
Right.
Yeah, nah, I don't really care. So the value goes way down. Your truck that is the old beater that gets you there is the thing is at a tenth of the price is way more desirable
Right.
because that one's a tenth of the price. So you got to come way down on your price.
Hmm.
So you don't always have the assets. You got to think assets that people need.
Right.
People need a way to have clean water. People need a way to have food. People need a way to stay warm and keep their babies from, freezing to death or starving. Those things are what's going to matter. So you need to keep that in perspective. Now, interest rates can go out of control. So a lot of people, they basically say, well, I can just default on my credit card debt because I don't
Yeah.
even
Just don't pay
care.
it.
Right.
Hmm.
Now, when you talk to an economist, they say that's a really bad plan. And here's why. And work with me. So remember, when you have a huge dip in value, we'll say right now in a hypothetical world, right? Lots of houses are $500,000 and we have this huge inflation and they go up to some crazy value and then nobody can afford anything. Kevin is always pointing out that they raise taxes and interest rates to get this stuff under control. when they do that, the value goes way down. And all of a sudden, houses are $100,000. Well, you just sabotage your credit by not paying all your credit card debts and defaulting on everything. Nobody's going to help you out to buy all these houses at the reduced rate.
Right.
Because right now, when everything goes down to $100,000, everything's on sale. And you want to be able to capitalize and buy as much cool stuff as you can. So that way, when things kind of go back to the new normal, you're on top of the world. You know, people always say, oh, I buy when it's high because I'm an idiot. But you want to buy when things are on sale.
Mm-hmm.
And when nobody wants something, that's the time. You know, when classic cars, like I said, your cool truck that's 20 grand, you won't be able to get 5 grand for it. But if you have the 5 grand to buy a couple of cool trucks to put away for when things kind of go back to normal, and
Mm-hmm.
turns out there is an ebb and a flow, and things do eventually go back to normal, then you want to be in a position to pounce. The other thing that's concerning for people is they don't, it's almost impossible to time the market. And like, you don't know when hyperinflation is going to happen. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've been screaming that that kind of thing could happen anytime, that our economy has to collapse because there's no way we can afford $31 trillion in debt. Yet, magically, it keeps happening. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we keep going on. So if you were like, oh, well, 3 years ago, hey, you know, if or 2 years ago, if Biden wins, the economy is going to go to hell, or if Obama wins and we do national health care, the economy is going to go to hell, and you ran up lots of credit card debt, but you'd just kind of be screwed.
Right.
So nobody knows when that other shoe is going to drop, and you have to be paying attention to, you know, what's going on there, and just be aware that that can really bite you in the ass. But I would say if you're buying anything that is going to have real sustainable value, or it put you in a better position to, you know, take care of yourself, it's not wrong. You know,
Right.
as long as you can afford and sustain, you know, the debt. Now, I try and preach no debt for everything, but
That's that's the wisest decision. I would say that's the
you
wisest
know,
way
you
to go
listen to
if you can
somebody like
do
Glenn
it.
Beck, yeah, they're like, oh, you know, no debt, you just pay everything off, because
Yeah.
then you're in a position to do stuff. If you
Right.
had stacks of gold or whatever, then you're in a position. So, but again, I know you can't eat gold or silver, right? If you're trading
Right.
me a silver coin and I can't go buy something with it, but if I can, then I want it. You know,
That's a
it's
different
one of
story.
those things, right?
I mean, also silver is handy to have on hand for, you know, in like vampire or werewolf emergency. You don't know
Yes.
what's going to happen. So that is something valuable that does have a usefulness. I mean, if that vampire werewolf scenario plays out, I don't know how likely that is though.
Now, another thing I wanted to touch on is Kevin had pointed out that war is one of the big, you know, catalysts for
Hmm.
hyperinflation. And you're like, well, America, I don't really see America. You know, we're first world power. We can't get
Right.
into trouble.
We've never had
Now,
hyperinflation in the United States. That's never happened, right? It did
nah,
happen
that'd be ridiculous. A what?
two times. Two times.
All
So the
right,
first
what
one
happened?
was around 1780. It was right after the American Revolution, and it was basically due to the American Revolution in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it was just poor management. But
Mm,
basically, um, at that point, every state was producing their own cash, their own paper money, so they could
okay.
just print as much as they wanted. So people didn't want to pay taxes on goods that they were exporting. Why would I pay taxes on that? You know, somebody else should be paying taxes on that. Foreign countries did not welcome trade with America due to British pressure. The British weren't happy with the United States, so they tried to pressure other countries to not buy any of our goods. Um, States provided their own money and taxed other states. So if you wanted to buy something from the state next door, you would tax that state because it's always you just always screw everybody else. But if everybody's screwing everybody else, you're getting screwed too. And then the final one was um,
Civil War.
British imposed a lot of trade embargoes on the United
Oh,
States, so we couldn't really ship a lot of our goods overseas. So we were taxing everything that was coming into the United States. We couldn't ship anything out of the United States, and basically everybody got fucked. It took a
right.
long time to get that straightened out, get that train back on course. The second
Now,
time it happened
all right.
was 18 early 1870s, after the American Civil War. What happened was the Confederacy was scared that people were going to turn against them if they increased taxes. They needed people to support the war, and increasing taxes isn't a good way to do it. So what they did was they just just printed money. You just print it. You just make more. It doesn't matter if it has backing or not. How much gold can a dollar buy? Well, it's not going to be the same amount as it can next year. It's going to be a lot less. So nobody wants that money. And that happened in the Confederacy, but that was also happening to a lesser extent in the North. So once the war was over, now everybody's problem is everybody else's problems. And what do they do about
Exactly.
that? Well, this is one of the few times that the American government actually didn't make a dumb decision. What they
What?
decided to do was, let me just take a look here. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
you
what they
better
decided
check
to
the
do was
notes on that twice because
they
the
called,
government
yeah, I
not
had to double
making it.
check that one.
Yeah.
They came up with an idea called Redemption Day.
Yes.
Redemption Day basically was when you can start trading your cash in for gold.
Okay.
You can go to your bank. Not You don't have to go to like some broker somewhere. You just go to your bank, you give them your cash and say I want gold. But you got to make sure you have the fucking gold. You know what I mean? If you don't have gold and silver, that doesn't do any good. So what they did was they sold bonds to countries overseas, to different countries, for gold and silver, brought the gold and silver back to the United States, spread it around to all the banks in exchange for cash, and then on Redemption Day in 1979, they assumed everybody was going to bring their cash in and trade it in
I
for
think you
gold.
had the date wrong. Yeah.
Or was it not 1879?
1879. You
Did I
said
say 1979?
1979. Yeah.
Yeah, 1879. So Redemption Day finally does come around.
Okay.
And what happens? Turns out nobody runs in there to get gold because they know that they
It's
have the gold
fast.
and silver if they want it. Why would I be carrying gold around in my pocket when I can carry bills? I can trade it in if I need gold, but I don't have to. It's inconvenient. So it turns out just actually having the gold and silver on hand was enough to put people's mind at ease, and knowing that the money has value. And there you go. That's all you have to do. Um, Now that would never work for a lot of reasons, but for the main reason is that we have politicians that just want to get elected 2 years from now. They're not really concerned about what happens 40 years from now. They're only concerned about getting reelected. If they can't make you happy in 2 years, they're out of a job. And if they're out of a job, they don't have power. And you know why everybody gets into politics? They want power, they want money, but it's really just a way to get good looking girls. That's really what money and power comes down to. You know what I'm saying? No girl wants to date a broke loser. And
Yes.
senators and congressmen are the epitome of the opposite of a broke loser. You can't be a congressman. It's almost impossible to be a congressman and not get rich, you know?
Right?
It's also almost impossible to not be a congressman and not already be rich before you become one. You know?
That's part of it.
Double standard.
But if
The
you have a
rich get
twinkly
richer,
smile,
and
you're
that's it, man. You just got to be charismatic, you know?
there you go.
I've never
Yeah.
met a person that a cult leader or a politician that wasn't charismatic, and they both about the same level of individual. If you ever wonder about like how to spot a psychopath, look at any presidential election. Any person up there that's trying to become the Republican or Democratic nominee for president, any one of those people, psychopath. That's how you tell.
Yeah. Exactly. Um next So you had mentioned like all the kind of bad decisions that led to the U.S. hyperinflation, right? Well,
Hmm.
it turns out a lot of those things, corruption in the government,
Hmm.
printing money out of control,
Right.
those things could be happening in the United States
What
right
are you
now.
talking about, Chuck?
Now, here's the other thing that's kind of crazy with war. So it turns out a lot of people right now are speculating that China, there's a real good chance, is going to invade Taiwan before the end of the Biden presidency.
Right. Right.
And
Good
just a
chance.
high probability, right? And they keep pushing and pushing right now. They're surrounding Taiwan and hey, what are you going to do if we do this? And
Hmm.
America doesn't exactly show strength lately. I know that, the soldiers are great guys and we're kicking ass, but our leadership decisions are not always top shelf.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you just leave tons of equipment over in Afghanistan. We've been known to make some bad decisions. Um,
Yeah.
that has actually bit us in the ass in the future. But well, who knows? So anyway, something about Pentagon leaks, things like that. People think that China might be on the cusp. Now, I
Yeah. It
would
seems
say,
that
yeah.
the U.S. government feels like this might be happening.
Now,
Whether
mind
you
you,
think it or not, whether they say it out loud or not, that's
right.
what they think is going to
That's the
happen.
feeling. I will say, like anybody could take internal documents, like it's like taking things out of context.
Hmm.
You can, I like some things are an obvious smoking gun, but some things are also like, um, that you could, like you might have one guy in your staff who's like super pro war and wants to do things like that. And you might have another guy, and you, as the president, might take the advice of both. And then you decide your own thing. You just want to hear the best argument each way.
Hmm.
And that could be, and these stuff could be from the crazy guy who just gives you the perspective, the
Yeah.
out of the box
Yeah.
thinker. I don't know. But what I do know is if China invades Taiwan, they said immediately within the first year we would have a 9% reduction in GDP because we won't have access to the chips and that
Right.
we use to produce like everything.
Right.
Like, you remember when we had the chip shortage already?
Yep.
And it was like, oh, I can't get a new truck. Oh, if I order the new Dark Horse Mustang, I can't get the upgraded stereo, and they're only going to give me $100 off because it doesn't have the right chip. What the
Right.
hell? I'm just saying that
Right.
might be a thing.
And you have to pay for it now, and
Right.
maybe you'll get that car in 2 months.
So now you heard me say 9% reduction in GDP.
Hmm.
During the Great Depression, there was a 7.5% reduction in GDP.
Hmm. The
Now,
Great Depression. Right. So we're talking
right,
about 9%.
right. And that's just one thing. They just said just chips. Now,
Hmm.
let's talk about what else happens if we go to war with China. All those container ships that go back and forth
All the
that
time.
one we sell stuff or get rid of all our cardboard for some reason to
Yeah. We
China,
send our recyclables to them,
our
and they send us
recyclables,
all
and
brand new
they
shit.
throw them in the ocean and we
Yeah.
pay them to get rid of them safely.
Right.
And they send us the really cheap goods that go on the shelf at Walmart.
Hmm.
You know what's not going to be on the shelves at Walmart?
Cheap goods.
Cheap goods, because they're not going to be coming all of a sudden. And Kevin, what's been your experience when the supply goes away? Like if all those really cheap things aren't on the shelf,
Right.
then
Then what?
everybody buys the expensive things, but you're like, well, I could pay a little bit more. But wait a minute. But if everybody's buying the expensive things, there's not that many left. I don't think people really comprehend what's going on there. That could end really bad. And, Slowburn put that we've been the loudmouth of the playground, and everybody's starting to realize that we're talk and we're no bite.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a big thing with America.
Hmm.
Um, we
Sometimes, I mean, sometimes the truth is you don't, you can be a loudmouth asshole, but you have to punch somebody in the mouth every once in a while. If you don't
exactly.
do that, you're going to end up getting your ass beat.
And that's one of the things. I mean, that's why like Reagan, people were like, "Oh, that guy's kind of crazy. He's a little,
Hmm.
he
Yeah.
might nuke us if we piss him off."
Yeah, I'm not a Trump fan, but that he definitely had that shit going for
He
him.
had the crazy factor,
Yeah,
you know.
we
You're
don't know
like,
what
"Oh,
he's gonna do.
North Korea steps the wrong way. There's a good chance there's a nuke
Yeah, they
dropping on him."
quieted down quite a bit after Trump became. I mean, they ran their mouth a couple of times right in the beginning,
Right,
and
to test it.
then
Yeah.
yeah, and then realized it's probably a bad move.
Right. And that's the thing. And like, everybody was like, "Oh, Trump's out of control and crazy." And he probably was. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not, but that worked for us, right?
Hmm.
In that aspect, for that one thing, that
Right.
was really cool. Cause it was like, oh well, and he never came out and said, "No, I would never do it." That don't even worry about it. He was like, "Yeah, well, my hair, I'm crazy, and who
Yeah.
knows, my skin's
Yeah.
orange."
Look how I style my hair. Obviously, I'm not a sane person,
Right.
but it was the same thing. People don't realize this, but Putin is terrified of a nuclear exchange. Terrified. And
Yeah.
everyone's talking about like being real worried. What's he gonna do? What if he sets off a little nuke? What was he gonna do? Nah, dude, don't worry about that shit. I say we should have troops in Ukraine right now because he's not gonna do shit because he's a pussy. That's
There you
just my
go.
opinion, and everybody disagrees with me, so maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
There you go. And that's the thing. Like I mentioned, Roosevelt carry a big stick, and
Mm-hmm.
speak
Right.
softly, carry a big stick. That's the thing. You
Mm-hmm.
can, but people have to know there's some teeth there. And America is not. It's weird because you would think all the fighting we've done in Iraq and Afghanistan would show that we have teeth. Like,
Right.
hey, look, we're backing it up. But
Mm-hmm.
we just kind of do these half-hearted, let's just throw, it's like Vietnam,
Yeah.
it's like,
What was
yeah,
and
we're
it
fighting
it
the
was just
war,
like
but we're not.
the first
Yeah.
Iraq war where we you know, destroyed their military, and then we're like, all right, have fun, bye.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, I hate to say it, people are learning that if you can just wait out America, we don't really have the staying power. We don't
Right.
have resolve to see
Hmm.
things through. And but bottom line, hyperinflation, I'm just saying, it's a thing that it's possible, and there are ways to protect yourself. And even if it doesn't go as dramatic, like they're actually saying right now that inflation's on the decline, that we're actually coming out of things.
Yeah,
I'm
you know
not
what?
buying that shit for a minute.
I read that story today. I read
Dude.
that story today where they're saying inflation is decreasing. It's not. Yes, inflation is decreasing, but there's still inflation. It's still happening. It's
Right.
not like your money's getting more valuable. It's still getting less valuable every day.
Right.
It's not like it's going away or you know
I,
things are getting better. It's just not as bad as it was 2 months ago.
yeah, exactly. No, it's bad. Let me I went to the gas station 2 days ago. Gas was 3.44 a gallon. And then I went yesterday and it's 3.74. I'm like, fuck, 30 cents in a day?
A
You're
day.
killing me.
Yep.
It's that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Basically inflation. Let me see. I got some numbers here. It was, pretty much forever. We haven't been over 4%. And now we're like touching on 7. And the chart I have only goes up to 2021. I checked out for 2023. It's not good. We just keep going up. Right now, I dip back down. We're like 6.7%, I think.
Right.
And they're
Right.
like, look, it's coming down. Things are
Yeah.
great. And I think we're just kind of like fudging the numbers a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really depends on the math you do. You can pick the inflation you want to pick because a lot of people are saying it's closer to 9% than 6%. But as long as you just pick what you're choosing, choose what you want to what you want to measure,
Yeah.
If you
But I will,
measure milk and bread, that's one thing. But if you measure gasoline and you know
right.
gasoline and food, not the same thing.
Exactly. But I will say, I mean, this stuff does get out of control. So I will say, if you guys stick around, we might do a couple-minute after show. We'll actually, pop back up and see if we can do an after show. But I will say, I appreciate it. If you could like and subscribe, that would be awesome. It really helps us out. I appreciate you guys showing up on a Saturday morning all the time because I know it's tough. Everybody's got lives and things to do and things to get out there. And we're happy to, you're listening to the podcast, downloading it, putting it, listening in the car on the way to work. Happy to
Mm-hmm.
be part of the team. So that's awesome. And I would say with that, stay safe and we will talk to you guys next week.